in my work, I say we're moving with. Brent is moving with me. He's moving with Jacob.
Love that.
He's moving with.
Love that.
And our people can move with us. And we're moving together to the next place, the next stage, whatever that is.
Welcome back to another episode of the Todd Durkin Impact Show. And this is your host, Todd Durkin. And I am so fired up today for the episode. Why? Because we're talking healing. Yeah, healing. Is anyone else healing out there? Physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually? Is there any form of healing that you've got going on, or something close to you, or you need some healing going on? And matter of fact, I introduce a new form of healing today, a disorder overcoming this COVID thing that is going to help you deal with whatever you may have going on. So as you go for your walk today, you're out walking the pup, you're out jogging, running, you're doing your weight work, or you're driving around town right now as we drop the kiddos off to school. Woo-hoo. Is anyone else excited as I am that the kids are back in school and we got our routine going back? This is a great thing. Yes, it is. But today I want to talk about healing. As a matter of fact, it's a friend of mine, someone who I've known for a long while now. As a matter of fact, her mom has trained at Fitness Quest 10 for close to 2 decades. And I've known her stepfather for a long time, and he's a legend in the local community as well, which I'll talk about in today's episode. But today's episode is with my friend Susan Hannifin-MacNab. Now check this out. Susan's a social worker, educator, and author who holds a master's degree in social work, a bachelor's in education, and credentials as a teacher and school social worker. After the sudden death of her surfer, professor, bagpiper husband when their son was just 5 years old, Susan founded A to Z Healing Toolbox, a heart-based business that assists the bereaved in healing with intention. She facilitates conferences and workshops, professional development trainings, psychoeducational healing retreats, and keynote speaking presentations internationally. Susan's 5-time award-winning book, A to Z Healing Toolbox, a practical guide for navigating grief and trauma with intention, is used by mental health practitioners and bereaved communities worldwide. Susan also serves as the programs and education manager for Soaring Spirits International. Now that's a great name, which is a nonprofit organization that provides programming, conferences, support, and hope to the global widowed community. My friends, this is an uplifting conversation, one that goes deep, one that when you think about your worst nightmare happened to Susan, but how she's taken this adversity literally and overcome and now is impacting thousands of people worldwide by the work that she is committed to doing. And you're going to hear all about it in today's episode, all about continuing to keep showing up. A to Z Healing Toolbox. Without further ado, let's go out now to Susan Hannifin-MacNab. Folks, welcome back. My friend Susan is in the house. How are you doing today, Susan?
Hey, Todd. I'm great.
It is so good to have you here at Fitness Quest 10 in a different capacity versus doing lunges, push-ups, and squats, and at our Impact Retreat, obviously. I can't wait for you to share your story. It's going to be awesome.
Well, thank you. I'd love to share it.
Well, thank you for your courage and all that you've shared with me already. Folks, as I shared in the introduction, I'm so fired up for you to hear Susan's story. I've known her mom, Denise, for a long time, and her stepfather, Brian Fogarty, is a special man. He's an icon. He's an icon at the University of San Diego athletics. He's a great man. And Susan, thank you for being here today.
Thanks for having me, Todd.
So tell me a little bit about your story. Just bring me back a little bit about yourself and your journey into why you even wrote your book, A to Z Healing Toolbox.
Well, I guess I'll start way back in the 1970s.
Whoa.
I know.
That's way back. We're going back.
I grew up here in Scripps Ranch when this building here, Fitness Quest 10, did not exist.
Yeah.
And I had an idyllic childhood, mom, dad, dog, brother, perfect life in the suburbs.
Yep.
Nothing went wrong in my life until I was 41. And my husband went out for a drive and went missing for 2 weeks and wound up Now I'm widowed with a 5-year-old child, and that threw my life into all kinds of grief and trauma, and eventually the book. And I can backtrack on any of those items, but that is...
Let's backtrack to the drive.
Okay.
What do you mean he went out for a drive?
So my husband was a professor of international business. His name was Brent.
Okay.
And we were living overseas in Australia. We had been in Australia, Canada, Hawaii, kind of in many interesting parts of the world.
Yep.
He was a big adventurer. We were coming back to San Diego to do a sabbatical here, an academic sabbatical. He was still employed at the University of Sydney in Australia. And we had been here a month. I had no job, no car, no home. We had just moved here. We were just in transition for about 6 months. We were going to be here. And he went out for a drive in the local mountains and did not show up for dinner, did not show up for breakfast. So I filed a missing persons report. And my father, who lives in Texas, hired a what do you call those people?
Detective?
Yeah, a detective,
Yeah.
a private detective, a
Yeah.
private investigator. And 2 weeks later, there was a nature photographer that found his car and his body in the mountainous area near a lake. So twisty, turning roads out in the Ramona area where a lot of accidents happen. And so it was 2 weeks of missing in action. Where's this person? Something that I had heard about happens over there, way over there to somebody else or in the military.
So take me back. You have a son, who's 5 years old at the time.
5.
Your husband doesn't come home at night. You're frantic. Where did he go? Cell phones existed at that point or did not?
They did.
Okay.
Although we had just moved from Australia and weren't active on them really, but we had them.
Yep. So what's going through your mind at this point?
I think, I've talked to several people who also had a loved one who was missing. It's surreal.
Yeah.
It's terrifying. It's hopeful. I mean, there are a million different emotions happening because you want to believe that they just, went to their buddy's house or they are, who knows, right? I mean, it's a situation that nobody ever would believe they would find themselves in.
Mm-hmm.
And the fortunate part, if there is a fortunate part, since Dad was an international business professor, he was traveling all the time and we were moving all over the place. So as far as I've had this question, well, what do you say to your son? Dad's at work. He's working. He'll be gone. He'll be back later. He's just gone right now traveling. He was traveling. We didn't know where. I mean, right? So what do you say to a 5-year-old? That doesn't make sense. We don't know where Dad is. So you don't say that.
So Susan, and please stop me if I go too deep here because I'm curious. At that point in your life, when he's missing, were things between you, the family, everything good? Or when he was missing, like, were there things that maybe he's run away from our relationship for a few days? Like, was everything idyllic and good? Or were there signs of maybe he's taken off and he's left me?
Right. No. Brent and I met when we were in our early 20s. We were together for 17 years.
Wow.
We had a marriage that had its ups and downs, just like any marriage,
Amen.
right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And we were committed to coming back here and settling somewhere on the west coast of the U.S. So there was not 1 second where I went, oh, he's taken off. Like,
Right.
he's with somebody else or he's, flown the coop. I mean, that was not, he was a very committed, very dedicated person.
Yep.
Career, family, friends, all of that.
Yeah.
So that was not in the cards or even in the thought.
So what did they rule his death as?
Accident.
And
in this part of Ramona, there are signs on the freeways that say, drive 55, stay alive or something like that. So we don't know. And when I got the knock on the door from the medical examiner, which is a knock nobody ever wants to get, at that point you stop questioning, well, how did that happen? And why did that happen? I mean, I went right into devastation, there are no words to describe that day.
Yeah.
And the years actually that followed that to try to rebuild, to try to even get up
Yes.
in the morning.
Talk
Forget
about that.
rebuilding.
Talk about that, because I know now you have a book and you're working for a nonprofit and there's amazing things you're doing 8 years later. But take me back to some of those days where you just didn't want to get up, but here you have a son who's 5, 6, thinks his dad's out working, changing the world, and deep down you just lost your husband. Take me back to how deep is that pain when you just don't even want to get up?
Well, the pain is as deep as the most bottomless, dark pit you can ever imagine. And I write about that in the book. You know, I felt like when I got that knock at the door, not so much when he was missing, because there's always hope. I'm a very hopeful, positive person, so there's always hope. There was no explanation, but I had hope. When the hope was gone, I felt like I fell into a bottomless well. It just kept going and going. The deepest, darkest place I had ever been or ever knew existed. And I write about this in the book, that not until I realized, which seemed like decades later, that, you know, this little kid poked me in the arm, "Hey, Mom." And I went, I have to survive this for him. You know, and as parents who care and love our children to no end, he was the reason I kept going. I did not care about myself. I had no job, no community. I mean, I grew up in San Diego, but then I left for 15 years.
Right.
So no job, no house, no car, no community, nothing.
Yep.
I shouldn't say nothing. My parents were here, thank God, and I had a couple girlfriends, but that was it. So I couldn't even think about rebuilding. It was, I'm going to get up and breathe and get him food.
Yeah. Well, I remember, I didn't know you at the time when this happened, but I certainly knew your mother, because your mom, Denise, has been a longtime client at Fitness Quest 10 between Pilates and training and body work. And I remember when she told me the devastation that she obviously felt, that we felt as a community, and praying for you and your son, of the unimaginable pain that you must be going through. When did you tell your son what happened? How old was he?
He was 5. I mean, it was actually the next day.
Okay.
So we got the knock on the door on my wedding anniversary, which is July 30th.
Okay.
So Brent actually died July 15th. He was missing until July 30th, which was our wedding anniversary. The next day, July 31st, is my birthday. So the most horrendous anniversary gift and birthday gift ever you could receive. But we had the pastor of a local church come over on my birthday. And he knew Jacob, because Jacob had gone to preschool there for a bit when we were in between Australia and San Diego. And he came over, Pastor Borgie from Penasquitos Lutheran Church, and sat with Jacob as I told Jacob that his father had died. And there's no way for a 5-year-old developmentally to understand what that means exactly.
Yep.
Because at 5, children are not developmentally able to understand permanency. Is he sleeping? Is he in Australia?
Right.
Like, what does that actually look like for a 5-year-old? So, months later, I remember Jacob would say things like, "So if Dad was alive, he would be here, right?" I mean, he was trying to understand what that meant. And so it began, just get up, breathe, get him food. My parents were on board to help with him, because I was pretty incapacitated for a long time. And this is me now, 9 years later, with a book, the programs and manager for a nonprofit, and people see me now, at the gym, and pretty vivacious and pretty positive, and they think, well, how could that situation have happened?
Yeah.
How did you get from that devastation over here?
That's right.
And there's a lot of conversation and time in between that.
Yeah. I want to talk about that in a moment, but as you have navigated your journey in the last 9 years, stepping back, you say obviously that Jacob got you through it. What else got you through the toughest of times, especially early on? What was it besides Jacob that was like, I just got to get up?
I'll tell you what it was. It was the gym, and it was fitness and athletics. And I never thought that I would lean so heavily on that. But Brent and I met at the gym. I grew up here, active, soccer, baseball, kayaking, soccer, all the things. And I knew I had to move. I knew I just had to move. So during that 2-week period where Brent was missing, I was at the gym.
Wow.
I had no clue what my life was. I knew I just had to get up and move. And so coincidentally, although I don't believe in coincidences anymore, I was in a small group training class with a woman named Robin at our old gym, which was Frogs at the time.
I remember that.
Yeah, in Carmel Mountain Ranch.
Sure.
And I happened to be in this small group training class, and this woman said to me, "How was your weekend?" And I said, "Fine," because I'm a great actress when I need to be. "How was yours?" And she said, "Oh, it was okay. I took my kids to SeaWorld." I said, "Oh, do you have yearly passes or a yearly membership?" She said, "Actually, we have a lifetime membership." I said, "A lifetime membership to SeaWorld? I've never heard of that." She said, "Well, my late husband was a marketing executive for SeaWorld and Anheuser-Busch, and he died 4 years ago."
Wow.
This is when my husband was missing. I now meet a young widow who's got a 9 and an 11-year-old at home.
Did you tell her?
No,
What?
because I didn't know what was going on. I just took that information and put it in my brain.
Yeah.
And then 2 weeks later, when I realized what my story is, I call my trainer, who I'm still good friends with, and I said, "That woman, Robin, I need her number right now."
Wow.
My husband just died, or he's dead, right? So I don't even know, I don't know anyone young who's widowed. I don't know how to do this with a kid. This is insane. 10 minutes later, I'm on the phone with Robin. And Robin has been my peer mentor, my friend, my soul sister for the last 9 years.
Isn't it amazing when you go through tough times how people appear in your life? It's a
Yes.
God thing that, like, whatever you're struggling with right now,
Yes.
people appear that either have walked that journey or are walking it at the same time, whether it be any kind of pain, physical pain, mental pain, emotional pain, spiritual warfare, and someone comes into your life or has been in your life that has gone through some of the same trials and tribulations as you have, and you never even knew it until that very moment.
Exactly.
Miraculous. That's a God thing.
It is a God thing. And speaking of God, I am a very God-centered person, and I always have been. But when Brent died,
Yes.
I hated God.
Yep.
I hated him. I yelled, screamed, cursed, stopped believing, just completely turned away, stopped going to church. I mean, I was someone who ran retreats in college.
Yeah.
I was singing in the church choir. I was extremely connected until I wasn't.
Yep.
And it took a long time for me to rebuild my faith in God, in humanity, in people. And I had to lose my faith to find it again.
When you say a long time, what's a long time? Months? Years? Yeah.
Years. I would say for the first 2.5 years after Brent died, I was livid.
Yeah.
I was livid. I was angry at God.
Angry.
I was angry. If I saw you and Melanie, I would have hated you because you were a young couple, my age, with kids. And
I got
you
robbed.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I actually had a therapist say to me, the first therapist I walked into, I sat there with my story, and he looked at me and said, "You got robbed." And then I lost it because that's how I felt.
Yeah.
I felt like I was, and I was so angry at God and Brent and everyone for that, taking
What
my
ultimately
life away.
brought you back to wanting to restore your faith? Was there a moment? Was it healing through time? Was there a person or a pastor that brought you closer back to a relationship with God?
All of the above. I went to priests, rabbis, ministers. I went
Love
looking
it.
for
Love it.
information. And that's what the book is about. Like my searching and running all over San Diego looking for answers and research and help. So I had a pastor when I told him my story, and I sat there with my arms crossed. I was so angry. He gave me a pad of paper and a pen. He said, I'm going to leave for 20 minutes. Write about it. Write to God. Tell him how mad you are. Tell him how angry. He was the first person that ever gave me permission to be angry at God or anything. It was amazing. So that helped. People showing up in my life miraculously that would pray for me, pray over me, pray
Healing.
for Jacob, because I couldn't do it. My parents, I knew because I was an educator, I knew what children needed. And there's a lot of research that shows kids who grew up with some sort of faith base, doesn't matter what it is, fare better in life. And so I said to my parents, you take him. You're his godparents. You do this thing with him. You take him to church, whatever. I can't do it. So for 9 years, they've picked him up every Sunday morning.
Wow. Isn't it amazing now, 8-9 years later, look at your life now, because you're helping people who are widowed. You're a social worker. You're an author. Your book is changing lives all over the place. You would have never probably volunteered for this position 9 years ago, right?
Never.
But look at how you're impacting people now from all over the world because of your journey. And I know you can't predict it back then. You would never choose that route, but the route that was anointed and ordained to you. Wow, oh, wow. And I do want to talk about your book, but before we talk about A to Z Healing Toolbox, I want to ask about Jacob. How is Jacob doing now? He's 14. He's going to be a freshman in high school. Tell me about Jacob now as a young man.
He's amazing. He's the most soulful, spiritual, kind, interesting kid I've ever met. And I know people think their own children are amazing, and they are. But it's very, he's a poignant individual. His spiritual depth is unlike mine sometimes. He's been forced into looking at life and death, heaven and hell. Where did Dad go? Where do we go? Do I really believe in heaven? I mean, these are the questions that he asks himself. He's been in Christian schools, so that has helped foster that faith base. He is a little entrepreneur like his father. He's extremely musical. He's in the youth symphony in San Diego playing the saxophone. He plays the piano. Brent he played the bagpipes, the guitar, like all the things, and Brent could do it. Jacob is the same.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Like father, like son, huh?
Right. So he's an interesting blend of both of us. My brother and father and grandfather are all mechanical engineer, military pilots and submariners. Jacob is
left brain. They're left brain people.
Yes, Jacob is very much an engineer himself. So he'll be in the engineering program in high school. So he's just an eclectic mix of awesomeness and knowing. Yeah, I mean, and is that a phrase?
It is. It's a word we just made up. Awesomeness. I like it.
A
whole bunch of awesomeness.
Yeah, and nobody would ever look at him and say, "This horrific thing, this tragedy happened in this kid's life," and that's a testament to God, community, parents,
his mother.
right? And I believe with so many widowed people that I work with that the children of surviving widowed people are only as strong as the parent who's still here. And so however I can help widowed people with children, my focus is the adult. Because if the adult is not okay, the kids aren't okay. And so people have poured into me, my parents, community, friends, people at the gym. I've really met some amazing people who've poured into me so that I can then support Jacob.
If Jacob could talk to his dad now, what do you think he'd ask him or say to his father?
Ooh, that's a tough one. But I will tell you this story. I talk to people who are mediums, who are conduits between the spiritual world and the physical world.
Yep.
And so a couple years ago, I brought Jacob to West Hollywood, where my medium lives. And I felt that it was important to have this child be able to connect with his dad, because I don't have that power. I don't have that gift.
Yes.
Right. And
It
I
is a
believe
gift.
it's a gift.
Yeah.
And some people may think it's really out there and woo-woo. But after I spent 4 days on a retreat with a marriage and family therapist who specializes in grief and a medium, 4 days with a medium was all I needed to believe that when we go somewhere, we go, but our spirit is here. We are spiritual beings. And so we had a conversation, me, Jacob, Brent, with this medium, right, as the translator. And it was enough for Jacob to know, I believe, that his dad's around.
Yes.
His dad knows, his dad
Love
sees,
it.
all of that. So we got questions answered there. But I think it's probably enough for Jacob to know that he'll see his dad again.
Yep.
And that his dad's around. He knows.
Awesome. Yeah, it reminds me of the quote, we're spiritual beings living a human life versus human beings living a spiritual life.
Yes.
Right? We're spiritual beings living a human life. We're spiritual beings. We're here forever. Our spirits will live on. How about his father? What do you think his dad would say right now to Jacob? Or what does he say to Jacob? At 14 years old now, a young man growing up and has a lot of the same skill sets as Brent did. What do you think Brent would say to Jacob?
Well, I think Brent would just be so proud. I know he is proud.
Yeah.
He is just an amazing teenager, and he's a really cool mix of both sides of the family.
Yeah.
So I don't know specifically what he would say, but I'm sure he'd have a lot of fatherly advice, right?
Yeah.
And so now the physical fatherly advice will come from Brian.
Yeah.
Who's stepdad, who's grandpa, who's mentor, who's all of these things.
Yeah. I think every son wants to hear from their father, I'm proud of you. Right? I love you and I'm proud of you. And young boys don't get that enough from their fathers, right, dads? We need to make sure we're saying it to our sons and to our daughters, obviously. But I'm proud of you. I love you. I mean, that affirmation, that love is what every son wants to hear from their parents and specifically their father. And I'm sure that Jacob would hear that from Brent because of the amazing things that he's certainly doing right now. And going into high school, what an exciting time for mama.
Scary.
Right? So let's talk about this awesome book, A to Z Healing Toolbox. There's so many things I want to talk about it. Give me the backstory. The A to Z Healing Toolbox, what's it about? Who's it for?
Well, the book is really for anyone, although it's geared toward people who are grieving the loss of someone they love. It could be a spouse, a child. It could be a parent. It could be a friend. It could be the loss of their health. It could be any profound loss, grief or trauma loss.
Okay.
It came about after I was running all over San Diego looking for resources to help Jacob and I. I can be very left-brained also. It takes me a while to get over to the right side, but I can do it. So my left brain self said, I've really got to put all this information I'm getting in order. So because I was a teacher type first, I started collecting information, whether it was therapists I was going to, and I knew about a variety of therapy techniques because of my background as a social worker. Animals, right? Letter A in the book is animals. Why are animals helping? I was going to a therapist. She had a therapy dog. Why do I feel calmer with this dog? Maybe I should look into that. So all this information got gathered, and I put it all in a binder. Then I needed to organize the binder, and it became A, animals, B, breathwork, C, counseling. I was then invited to speak at a conference called Camp Widow, which is the greatest place you never want to find yourself. There's a Camp Widow conference in Toronto, Tampa, and San Diego every year. It's run by the organization I now work for called Soaring Spirits International. So now that I work for Soaring Spirits International, I can say that Camp Widow is it was amazing for me as a camper attendee, but now I help put it on. And it's basically hundreds of widowed people converging at the Marriott, and there are workshops on everything under the sun, from what do you do with your person's belongings, to how do you raise a child solo, to cooking for one.
Jeez.
All the things.
To healing.
all the different things, rebuilding, art.
That must be deep.
It's deep, but it's also, it just gives people a breath of fresh air, because sometimes young widowed people think that they're aliens. You know, we walk around and we don't know any younger widowed people. Like, we're not divorced, we're not old. Like, what is this thing? So to get 400 of us in the same room is awesome.
Yeah.
But I was invited to present a workshop. At the time, I called it Alphabet Healing Toolbox. And I came in, I printed out a 26-page workbook for everyone, 26 pages, A, B, C, D, E, that's it. Gave them each a copy. There were about 25 people in the room. And they looked at this and said to me, "Where did you get this?" I said, "Well, these are all the tools I'm using to help my son and I heal." And they said, "You've got to make this a book." And I said, "No, absolutely not. I'm not.
I'm not an author.
I am not looking to be an author. Forget it." But I had a couple of them push me, even via email. You know, "I really think you should. I really think this would be amazing. We need this information." One of the women who really pushed me is a physician, widowed friend of mine who lives in LA. She was widowed when her husband died from a gunshot wound at a firing range, a gun range, 4 children at home. And she's a go-getter, and she said, "You've got to do this and I will help you."
Wow.
And I said, "Okay." So the right people showed up.
Yep.
And it became a book that is now full of 26 chapters, just a tiny bit of how I used each tool in my healing, snippets from other people in the community as to how they used these specific tools in their own healing, and then the why, because I'm a big why person. Like, why is this going to help? Why are animals going to help me? Why is S is sliding into exercise? What does exercise do? Oh, well, it increases our endorphin level. I mean, all the different things, right? So there's the why in each chapter as well.
Well, I love it. When I'm looking at the book right now, folks, if you're probably listening, unless you're watching on YouTube, A to Z Healing Toolbox, breath work. These are some of the ones I asterisked. And when I wrote my WOW book, it's very short chapters. That's what I love about this book. They're short chapters, very digestible. Like, you can read them in 5-10 minutes. Breath work. J, journaling. Y'all know I'm a huge believer in journaling. L, laughter. I'm thinking, wow, healing. Laughter is healing by itself, let alone for someone grieving. Meditation. You said sliding into exercise. T is touch. I love touch.
Right?
I did my graduate thesis work on the physiological and psychological effects of massage on stress and anxiety. I dove into that, page 209, on touch on this. And why? Your self-care. Self-care we talk about now. I mean, by the way, healing, all of us are in some form of healing now, even if you're not a widower, with the whole COVID and the pandemic. What do you think out of the 26 tools should people gravitate towards? Are there a few of them that kind of resonate more with you out of the 26 tools?
That's a great question. I always say, go where you're comfortable. Right, exercise was my go-to, and C, counseling. Like, I knew I needed therapy, and I knew I needed to move.
Yeah.
Those were the two that I did over and over and over again until I could integrate more. Touch, right? Widowed people or bereaved parents, I work with them as well. When there's no one to hold or no one to hold you, it's like you're in this vacuum, this void of nothingness. There's no touch. There's no touching your child if your child has died. There's no touching your spouse. So touch is a big one too. I always say to people, go get a massage, go get your nails done, go get your hair done more often, just have somebody touch you. And that's not really something people think about when there's grief involved. But as you say, touch is, I mean, right? It lowers depression, lowers anxiety.
So you're giving everyone permission now to get their nails done more.
Yes.
Melanie, are you
Nails,
listening
hair.
to this right now? No. That's awesome. I like that. And by the way, in the book on page 211, how does touch promote healing? By inducing oxytocin, the bonding hormone that's known for reducing stress, by lowering stress level, heart rate, and blood pressure, by strengthening the immune system, by easing symptoms of depression and anxiety. Isn't that interesting that right now in the last year and a half, people haven't been touched as much as normal? kids haven't been touched as much as they need to be in a positive way. I believe there's a follow-up pandemic here, the lack of touch, high fives, handshakes, hugs, all of these things. The power of touch. Dr. Tiffany Fields, she's down at the Touch Research Institute in Miami, Florida, talks about the power of touch as well. Study her as well, because in the massage therapy world, the bodywork field, she's someone who I've always looked at, included her in my graduate thesis work in the 90s. The power of touch, whether you're an infant or you're an adult, is huge. And folks aren't getting that enough now. And isn't it interesting, folks, as you listen in, if you have a spouse and your kids in your life, start touching them more often, because many times you don't even realize how much you miss touch until you don't have your spouse in your life anymore and you can't touch them.
Yes.
Hug your folks. Hug them. Hold them. Hold hands. I'm always trying to hold my daughter's hand, and she's in 8th grade now. She doesn't want to hold my hand. I'm like, oh, you're holding my hand until I walk you down the aisle, girl. I'm making her hold my hand.
Well, I'm laughing because as I was leaving my house today, Jacob's having breakfast, and I always touch him as I walk by because I'm a physical touch person anyway, but I've gone overboard with that because Dad hasn't been around.
Yeah.
And he goes, Mom, can you walk by me once without touching me?
That's like Luke at college. He was trying to hug my Melanie, and he was like, it was like a wet fish. I'm like, no, hug your mom. Don't give me one of those cold shoulder, wet fish kind of hugs. You hug your mother, right? Hugging. These are things that are so important. Touch. I love that one, by the way. And I love the action steps that you put after the chapters as well. How is, here's one single small step I'm able to make in the future, and you write down those action steps. The other thing you talk about in your book, and I think it's important, is resilience. Resilience. Do you think resilience is something that is innate, we're born with, or is it learned?
I think it's both. And I've seen that with the thousands of people I've worked with, right? There's this growth mindset.
Sure.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And if we feel like, well, I was given all my resilience when I was little and I have no more, that's not a growth mindset. Mm-hmm. So the book is full of, and my workshops are full of, and my speaking is full of, there are tools that you can integrate into your life to become more resilient.
Yeah.
So gratitude, X in the book is examining your positives. And a year after Brent died, I had a wonderful friend and mentor mention to me, you might want to start a gratitude journal. And I threw her out of my house and didn't talk to her for a year later. A year later, I called her and said, sorry about that, but I can't do gratitude. No, I'm not doing gratitude right now because I was so angry. But that is a resiliency tool that I've integrated into my own life, that we have a gratitude jar at home. And every day there's a Post-it note and a pen, and we'll put in a gratitude or 2 or 3. Or I will pick up the phone or write a letter or text somebody, I'm so grateful for you. Thank you so much. That's not something I did so much before Brent died. And so that is a skill that's learned. That is helping with my resiliency going forward.
So in your counseling, do you now, if someone's angry about whatever it may be, about the situation in the world, they're hurt, they've been hurt, they lost their job, they're angry. You just said that there was a period of time where you couldn't have gratitude. You didn't have gratitude. So if someone's living in anger right now, would you say to them, experience that anger, and when you get through it, you need to focus on gratitude? Or do you need to combat that anger with gratitude now so that you can get through that anger quicker? Does that make sense?
It does. And I think it's different for each person. What I do when I work with people is I tell my own story. Mm-hmm. This is how much time I was angry. I still get angry about certain things, right? Like, where are you, dude? You're supposed to be driving your kid to practice, not me. I talk to Brent all the time. It's like people might think I'm crazy. It's like, hello, where are you?
I need you right now.
Exactly. So it depends on where they are. Mm-hmm. The book is really, here are 26 different ways.
Yes.
Pick one. Some people have the book on their nightstand and they just blindly open it to a page and go, okay, I'm going to look at this today.
Yeah, I love it.
And if they're not ready for that, if they're not ready for journaling, because I wasn't for a long time ready for journaling, I used an illustrated discovery journal, which is a different type of journaling that is pictorial. So you get a stack of magazines, you get your scissors and your glue, and you start ripping out pages that call to you. This is right brain stuff now, right, Todd?
Absolutely, it is.
You start
This is
ripping
good.
out images, and then you paste them into a book. There's no writing, because often when people are traumatized, writing is a left brain mechanism, right? You're a mess. I was a hot mess for a long time, and the left side of the brain is where reason, order, and logic are stored.
That's right.
I'm sorry, but my situation, there was no reason, order, or logic to that. So my therapist had to get me into the right side of my brain, which was journaling pictorially, which was, imagery-based, symbolic imagery play, a sand play therapy, which is a form of therapy that is nonverbal. It is pulling images and figures into a tray of sand. Very powerful, because you're accessing emotion, but you don't have to talk. You don't have to say with words.
Yeah. That's interesting. I think about journaling. How long did it take you before you could actually start putting your emotions on paper? Was it months?
Well, the first time I did any of that was with this pastor who said, here's a pad of paper and a pen, and I'm going to leave and come back. And I was like, rah, and so, but I couldn't do that consistently. And I have to say, this is fun. When I was in here at your Max Impact Retreat, you gave us a journal, and my immediate reaction was, oh, no.
Here we
Oh,
go.
great. It's usually a force for me to journal. I mean, someone has to say, hey, or someone has to remind me, hey. And so I journaled in here, but it's not something I do every day with words.
Yeah.
I do it pictorially.
I remember that. I remember seeing those pictures on your, in your journal.
Right.
Eloquent, because I don't do pictorial journals. As a matter of fact, interesting, I'm the exact opposite. In the toughest of times or adversity, I go right to my computer and start writing. And I have cathartic breakdowns if I'm going through a tough time or if I've had setback. Going back to my father's dad, I remember writing and crying, or when Melanie miscarried years ago, I remember going right to the computer and having cathartic writing come out, spewing on the paper of some work that it was more healing. For me, it was getting that out and healing. So it's interesting to hear your process on your healing, because like you said, everyone heals at a different rate, different pace. And as your 26 ways described so eloquently, there's not one right formula.
Right. And someone said to me, well, wait a minute, you don't like journaling, writing. How did you write a book? I mean, what? Like, how did that happen? And so for me, the book became cathartic.
Yes.
But I was using my left brain, and I was talking with Larry about this the other day. How I put the book together was not from start to finish. It was, okay, here are the tools. I got those. All right, now I'm going to put in the why. Why are these tools helpful? Okay, here's all the social worky left brain stuff. Here you go, people. And the book publisher said, this is wonderful, and people want your story. They want to know about you, how you use these, why you use these. You can't help people until you get vulnerable.
Yeah.
And you know this. Yep. So then I went, oh, and then the cathartic writing began as to how these tools helped me.
Susan, you talk a lot, not just in the book, but I've heard you talk about in your teachings and in your speaking, post-traumatic growth. And I've joked around in the past 6 months or so that I have not PTSD, but PTCD. Post-traumatic COVID disorder. Does anyone else have PTCD? Don't worry, it's a term I just made up. But I think I do have post-traumatic COVID disorder. But when you talk about post-traumatic stress disorder, what can you tell me about post-traumatic growth, and how does it play into the work you do with others? Or PTCD, if you'd like to address that. Because everyone listening right now, I know y'all have some form of either small or big PTCD.
Yes. COVID, this last year and a half has been no joke. So there are a lot of us who are grieving and traumatized for so many different reasons.
Yes.
Post-traumatic growth, really, if we had a coin here, on one side of the coin would be PTS, right? Post-traumatic stress, and all of the experiences that we have to create that stress. On the other side of the coin is post-traumatic growth. And there are 5 areas of growth that can come for people out of a situation that's adverse. And I'll tell you what the 5 are. And if you want to dive deeper into those, we can do that. But first, a little background. PTG, post-traumatic growth, that term was coined by some researchers at the University of North Carolina. I know your son's in North Carolina right now. But they were working with bereaved parents. And over a decade of working with bereaved parents, they saw 5 different areas of growth from these individuals who had a child die. I mean, what?
Right.
So the 5 areas became what I call an oasis, OASIS. So the O stands for opportunity. There are new opportunities that have come from this situation that has been traumatic or tragic. For me, the opportunities have been endless. I now work for this nonprofit serving widowed people all over the globe. I've written a book that's helping thousands of people, on and on and on. So that's O. The A is appreciation. Many people come out of their experience having a greater appreciation for life in general, for people in general, for some things. So that's the A. The S is strength, inner strength. I've been through that hell. I can get through anything. You want me to stand in the corner and eat peanut butter for a day? I will do it. I will do whatever it takes because I can, because I have that inner strength. Not that I want to do that.
I'm trying to visualize that, a day of eating peanut butter. Okay.
And then the I in Oasis is interpersonal relationships. Often, after a situation that is very adverse or causes a great amount of trauma or stress, we can come out of that with stronger interpersonal relationships. People that come into our lives for an unknown reason, we can create strong bonds with, the thousands of widowed people I work with, the hundreds of bereaved parents. We feel an automatic connection because of that adversity. And then the last S, you'll love this one, is spirituality. There can be a movement toward a deepening of your current or your past spirituality, or it can change altogether. For me, my spiritual path changed. It's much deeper, but I don't do what I used to do in my previous life. So there can be changes that are significant and positive.
Yeah. That's amazing. 5 areas of growth, OASIS. What a great acronym. I love acronyms. Think of impact's an acronym. OASIS is a great acronym. I think when I hear appreciation, I think of extreme gratitude. I hear, appreciation, extreme gratitude. And when you say inner strength, the resiliency and the grit that it takes to overcome that. Now, we don't obviously want to lose a loved one to have to experience growth. But what a great perspective that if and when one was to lose a loved one or some massive loss in one's life, to think about areas of growth as an opportunity. That's amazing.
Yeah, and that acronym in post-traumatic growth really has to do with any sort of post-traumatic experience, right? So it could be someone who comes out of war. It could be someone who's sexually assaulted. It could be any traumatic experience.
Susan, what would you say is the most important thing you've taken away from your experience in grief? I
think one of or maybe the most important thing I've taken away is that we need other people to heal with. We can't do this work in a vacuum in our house, grieving ourselves. What I have done and what I suggest others do is find others to be part of your community. Doesn't mean you're sitting around crying together, right? But it just means find others who understand your path. Connect with other people in the community. I believe that we all heal together and we're on earth together for that reason. So,
do you think it's normal that if someone's going through the loss of a loved one, there's this mentality that they don't want to connect because you said it earlier, they wouldn't understand how I feel or my situation, or I'm not ready to heal? Is that a normal feeling and emotion that one would have?
Yes. Actually, in the book, so the first 2 chapters, there's one on grief. Yep. What are the common grief reactions in adults, and what are the common trauma reactions in adults? In both of those lists, isolation is very real.
Yeah.
It can be a very personal experience. And then at some point, you're there by yourself and there's no one helping you. And so I always recommend, as a matter of fact, I met someone yesterday, a young man, well, he's 49, 2 kids at home.
Young man, you said?
He's young, right?
Man.
I know.
Young whippersnapper.
It's like he's not 80 and widowed. He's 49 and
Yes.
widowed with
Yeah,
2
yeah.
kids. His wife died for breast cancer 4 years ago, and he's still kind of spinning around. He hasn't gone to therapy. He hasn't met any other widowed person who's young with kids. So he has signed up now to go to Camp Widow in October in San Diego.
Love it.
And I gave him the name of an amazing therapist in San Diego who happens to be widowed herself. Not me, someone else. So he's now, 4 years later, ready to get help.
Yeah.
And there's no timeline. So that's the other
that's
thing,
powerful.
too. There is
That's
no
powerful.
timeline
Good,
for any
good.
of this. It's whenever you're ready, whenever you meet that person who's going to nudge, whenever that conference comes across your Facebook page, whenever it's time for you. So in our culture, right, Western world, you get 2 weeks off to grieve, then you go back to work
Yeah.
and you should be done. And certainly 365 days later, you should be moving on.
Wow.
You're done. Well, in my work, I say we're moving with. Brent is moving with me. He's moving with Jacob.
Love that.
He's moving with.
Love that.
And our people can move with us. And you know, we're moving together to the next place, the next stage, whatever that is. Some people, right, there's so many ways to react and act when we're grieving. I spoke with a woman last week. Her husband died 12 years ago. And now she's ready to deal with it.
Wow.
Because she ran, in her words, I ran and ran and ran, and she went to Africa and volunteered and did all these things because it was too painful. It is. It's painful. It's a massive void. It's hard to deal with. But there's no timeline.
Yeah. Susan, I am so proud of you to see you now come through this in the point where you're now helping so many people. I talk about impact all the time, but you probably attract folks who you can help on a weekly basis. You probably, as soon as you share your story, right, people reach out, and you an interesting kind of way, it probably feeds your soul, right? It feeds your spirit to be able to help people. So I love hearing you being able to help so many people who have been through hell and back and are dealing with everyone's worst nightmare.
Well, thank you. I mean, I appreciate the acknowledgement, and I, you know, I signed up to be a social worker long before Brent died, so I have a helping heart anyway. And now I really realize, oh my goodness, you know, life was preparing me for life.
Yeah.
And I was already an educator, so I know what these grieving kids need. And I was already a social worker, so I knew what I needed, and now I can push that out and help others.
So let me ask you, how can others in the community support anyone who may be grieving the loss of a child, a parent, a grandparent, a spouse, a best friend, anybody? How can the community support?
I have 3 words. Keep showing up.
Ooh.
Keep showing up. Our people are still dead. Brent's not coming back anytime soon. I'm still a solo parent.
Wow.
Best friends, spouses, partners, colleagues. These people have people connected to them, and we're still here.
Wow.
So people in the community need to keep showing up. Usually the meal train comes in for a month.
Yep.
And it's gone. And maybe somebody comes to mow your lawn for a couple weeks, and then it's gone. And we're still here. So keep showing up.
Wow.
Keep showing up. Keep showing up. And don't ask 20 questions. What can I do? How can I help you? Da, da, da.
Show up.
Just bring a meal over. Just go cut the grass. Just say, hey, can I bring your kids
Love
over
it.
there? There's so many ways to help one another, whether we're grieving, traumatized, or other stressors.
In the middle of a healing process, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so those 3 words are really, really key.
Wow. Keep showing up.
Time and time again, week after
I have
week,
goosebumps.
year after year,
Goosebumps.
year after year.
Goosebumps or God bumps moment right there. It made me think of when you said that. I heard a video a few years ago Dr. Rick Rigsby. It was a live event in Telluride, Colorado, and I showed this. He had just lost his wife, had kids, and he shared the emotions of losing a spouse. And he said every morning, you got to remind yourself the sun's coming up and get vertical. Get vertical and keep going. And I love that, Susan. Keep showing up. Whatever that means, keep showing up, keep getting up, keep moving forward. The sun's coming up. So however dark the days are, you got to keep showing up. And even now, folks who have been battling through a year and a half plus with the pandemic, there's a feeling of emptiness, lost, where am I going, all of the things, or you lost a loved one through the last year and a half. Keep showing up. Wow, that is good. I always like to end with this question. This is the Impact Show. Impact. What does the word impact mean to you?
What just jumped into my mind is helping others, impacting others, helping others. There's so many ways for us all to do that for and with each other. I know in our society we can be a little self-absorbed at times, but for me, impact is reaching out, helping others, whether that's one person, whether it's 10, whether it's 10,000, whether it's 10 million, right? And that can look so many different ways, but impact to me is really showing up and helping others.
Wow. I have an answer question. It just came to me. If Brent was here, what would he say to you?
Oh, now you're going to make me cry. Oh, wow. Yeah. He would say he's so proud. And I mentioned that I talk to mediums once in a while, but I also hear messages from Brent, and they come in the form of song. So this might be a little out there for some people, but we are all spiritual beings, right? So some of us we can hear auditorily what's going on in the spirit world. Sometimes people see visions, things like that. Brent was a musician, and he gives me what I call song slams. So usually it's right before I go to sleep or right upon waking up. When you're in that really mellow time, boom, a song will just come pouring through me, a song that I haven't heard in decades. And the last one was, who even sings this? She's a bad mamma jamma.
Keep going, I'm not sure.
Yeah, so
I know what you're talking about. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure who sings that. Somebody on this podcast will know.
Absolutely.
But that's the last song that I got. So he, for him, it's like, you're doing great work. You're awesome.
Yeah.
You've got it. You're a bad mamma jamma, right?
I love it. I love that. He keeps showing up and giving you these messages,
That's
right? Keep showing up.
Right.
Susan, if someone wants to connect with you, they want to connect with you, they want to follow you, they want to read your book, where can they find your book, and how can they connect with you?
Good question. So the book is everywhere. It's on Amazon.
Okay.
It's on my website, which is A2Z healingtoolbox.com.
Okay.
It's at Barnes & Noble. If
Amazon?
People, yes.
Okay.
Excuse me. Amazon, Barnes & Noble, my website. It's kind of everywhere. Both
Great.
are. If folks want to connect with me, they can email me, Susan, SUSAN, at A2Zhealingtoolbox.com, or through the website, A2Zhealingtoolbox.com. There's also a Facebook page, A2Z Healing Toolbox, so they can find me there as well.
Fantastic. I'll put that all in the show notes, folks. If you didn't have time, you're out for a run right now, you're working out, you're driving, you couldn't write that all down. I'll put it in the show notes. A2Z Healing Toolbox is where you want to go. Pick up her book, read her book. Susan, thank you. From the bottom of my heart, thank you for being here today and just inspiring so many people to keep showing up. That's the bottom line. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Remember, folks, keep showing up. Wow. Oh, wow. Thank you, Susan Hannifin-MacNab. Folks, did you enjoy that episode as much as I did? I love the conversation. You talk about healing, and please pick up the book, A to Z Healing Toolbox. At whatever level of healing you may be at, including I just introduced a brand new phrase to many of you, the PTCD, the posttraumatic COVID disorder. We're all healing in some way. Can I get an amen to that? please share this episode. Share it with someone who's in the healing process. Maybe they lost someone they love, or maybe they're just healing in another way, whether it be physically, mentally, emotionally, or spiritually. Please share this episode. It helps take this light, this positivity, this conversation, and get it out into the world that so desperately needs it right now. Folks, I want to say thank you. Thank you for listening to today's show. I so appreciate you as we're going into the fall here. I call, post Labor Day going into Q4. I want to say thank you for what you do. Keep lighting up the world. Most importantly, I want you to keep showing up. Until next time, remember, train hard, eat right, live inspired, and keep showing up.